It's my pleasure to welcome you and everyone to our January 2025 BUSSW Equity and Inclusion Speaker Series event. Ecological justice requires more than caring for our common home with Sister Sharon, Zayac, OP. My name is Deb Berglund, and I am the director of the BUSSW Cape Cod program and a member of BUSSW's Equity and Inclusion Committee, which includes all of our stakeholders, faculty, staff, students, administrators, and alumni. The committee has been around for many years, engaging in the work of building equity, inclusion, and justice here at BUSSW, as well as amplifying social justice-focused activities here in the community. Some of the work we have engaged in includes organizing social justice learning communities, creating anti-oppressive practice labs and mentoring, and partnering with different departments around social justice-focused interventions. We also have a wonderful resource page available to anyone that includes podcasts, peer-reviewed literature, and media articles that I encourage everyone to check out. Finally, we have a free 3-hour online module on structural and institutional racism with CEs that is available to anyone in the world. You can access many of these resources at our Equity and Inclusion webpage. I'm going to briefly review our format today and then get us started. I will introduce Sister Sharon, and she will present for about 30 minutes. We will then have 3 members of our BUSSW community offer a 1-minute reflection about the talk and ask Sister Sharon a question. Finally, we will be able to answer a few questions from our audience that you can type into the chat. Before we begin, I'd like to review a few Zoom housekeeping items. Anyone who is receiving CEs will need to keep their camera on during the entire session. If you are not receiving CEs, we recommend turning your camera off during Sister Sharon's talk. If you are receiving the CEs, you will need to complete the evaluation form. Julia will type that form into the chat at the end of the presentation. We suggest having your Zoom setting on speaker's view. We will be recording the presentation, so if you aren't comfortable being recorded and you aren't receiving CEs, please keep your camera off during the entire event. We will be posting the recording on our Equity and Inclusion Speaker Series page for a few days after the talk. All participants will be muted during the presentation. Please do not use the chat during Sister Sharon's presentations, as that can be distracting for the speaker. Closed captioning is available for the presentation. To use closed captions, you need to click on the 3 dots on your Zoom menu, and then click on the caption button, and choose Show Subtitles for the captions to overlay on your screen. Finally, it goes without saying that all comments in the chat should be respectful and mindful of our entire BUSSW community. We would like to begin our presentation with a land acknowledgement. A land acknowledgement reminds us all that colonization is an enduring reality, and that Boston University sits on the stolen traditional land of the Wampanoag, Mi'kmaq, and Massachusetts people. If you are outside of Boston, take some time to learn about the tribal lands where you live and the ongoing movements to have land honored, acknowledged, and returned. These past few months have been challenging for so many. With the devastating long-term effects of structural racism, climate disasters, classism, attacks on our transgendered siblings, and gender inequality, the timing of Sister Sharon's talk couldn't be more appropriate for our historical moment, where we as social workers, part of the world community, stand at a crossroad. How do we move from a human-centered worldview to one that places us within the world that we share with the whole community of life? Our speaker tonight, Sister Sharon Zayac, will discuss how this shift in worldview requires us to learn to think and speak inclusively of creation and acknowledge that who we are and all that we do are intimately connected with the whole. Zayac will explore the idea that our role as humans is to co-create a world where the whole of life might flourish, positing that no one flourishes unless all do, and that this can be the work of both science and faith. She will also discuss how understanding our evolutionary story as a scientific and spiritual journey offers us both promise and hope, and how the crises we currently face are opportunities to create the kind of world we want to inhabit. Our speaker tonight, Sharon Zayac, is a Dominican sister and an internationally known thought leader on the interconnection of ecology and spirituality. She is co-founder of Jubilee Farm, her congregation's 164-acre Center for Ecology and Spirituality in Springfield, Illinois. Zayac holds degrees in secondary education and hospital administration, as well as a master's degree in earth literacy from St. Mary of the Woods College in Indiana. She is an advocate, writer, public speaker, and retreat leader, and is particularly interested in the cosmic creation story and our evolving consciousness and their implications for life and faith. Please join me in welcoming our BUSSW Equity and Inclusion speaker, Sister Sharon Zayac.
I'm trusting everybody sees this.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Good. Thank you. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so pleased to be with you as we gather in this cyberspace. And I'm especially grateful to Margaret Lombe for her invitation to share with you some of my reflections on what is in reality an all-encompassing topic: ecology, ecological justice. Ecology is not a synonym for environment. It is an all-encompassing understanding of who our world is, how she functions as a unity, and how we are part of that entire whole. And until we embrace the reality of that wholeness, we will keep missing the mark in our relationships and in our best laid efforts to make a better world for us all. I want to begin by noting that I offer you my insights from a number of perspectives. Certainly my perspective as a woman, my perspective as a Catholic Dominican sister, whose religious order was founded over 800 years ago to refute the belief, still quite prevalent today, I might add, that separates the world into two distinct and warring realities, the material and the spiritual. My perspective as one who has long reflected on the integrity of creation, now finally expressed by Pope Francis in his encyclical Laudato Si, as well as his other documents and teachings. And my perspective as one who has come to perceive the meaning of justice in light of the above, in order that our work might become more effective and transformative. I have also come to embrace what our cosmic evolutionary story teaches us, and the essential role of both science and faith, both of which give us the context for our unique responsibilities as the human members of the greater Earth community. And yes, this has everything to do with your chosen discipline of social work. In fact, it sets the context for every discipline. When we speak of justice, we are really speaking about relationship, about right relationship, as interpreted philosophically and theologically. Science tells us that relationship is the fundamental reality of the universe. The relationship of all the quantum particles one to another, and the relationship of all the visible parts of creation one to another, and all the intertwined relationships among all of them are what holds the entirety together and allows that whole to continue to evolve into ever greater diversity and complexity. Everything is related, interrelated, so interconnected that we can never really speak about one part of creation without speaking about all of it. Nothing, no one, no thing stands alone in this universe. Everything is in relationship. And these relationships have evolved over the 13.8 billion year history of the universe, as well as the 4.5 billion years of our planet Earth. And it is more than obvious that those relationships we once thought immutable are now in a state of such disruption that the place we call home is already much different than it was when many of us were children. If we accept that justice connotes right relationship, then doing the work of justice, an awkward term at best, requires the intention to restore equilibrium or a healthy balance within those relationships that have been broken or distorted. I'm sure such a description fits much of your role in social work, though it should equally describe every discipline in which we are engaged. Doing the work of justice is working to make right what we humans have broken, to restore what we can to promote healing and wholeness. But rather than saying justice is a work about restoring the balance to mend broken relationships, I prefer to say the work of justice is to help restore the rhythm of right relationship within the community of life. Thinking we actually know what is needed to restore balance to an incredibly complex web of relationships is beyond arrogance. But because everything is interconnected, we know that anything we do anywhere to help restore health and wholeness resonates throughout the entire web. And that must give us hope that our efforts are worth our energy and our angst. Now, we've gotten into the habit of subsetting justice, naming it social or racial or criminal or economic. Understandable, as we need to focus on specific issues to begin to understand them and to help create effective solutions. But not effective when we lose sight that they are all aspects of the one bigger reality. Thinking in terms of ecological justice, however, moves us to look at justice in the broadest of spectrums. It is all-encompassing. Everything from refraining from doing egregious harm to Earth so she can flourish in all her beauty and integrity, to our making those economic, political, and social choices necessary to the whole Earth community to retain its inherent dignity, which allows in turn a vital, vibrant life for all. No one flourishes unless all flourish. So let me offer the following insights that set that context. Creation, the natural world of which we are part, has its own rhythm of equilibrium that plays out on every level of existence. On any given scale, what we call the natural order is really a cycle, a rhythm of birthing, maturing, breakdown, death, the ensuing chaos, emerging newness, birthing out of that chaos. There are some brief times of equilibrium in the cycle, catching its breath, so to speak, before the next movement in the cycle of breakdown and chaos, emerging newness, equilibrium. This has been true since the very beginning of the universe, and we witness it everywhere, don't we? As part of the natural world, we also live and move and have our being in that same rhythm. And though we always seem to want to extend and bask in those periods of equilibrium, they are often rather brief. However, as satisfying as equilibrium seems, there is no creativity there. Nothing new emerges without the impetus that comes with breakdown and the ensuing disorder and even chaos. Creativity, birth, only happen on the edge of chaos. That's how our planet works. It is how the universe works. It is how we work. It is how Holy Mystery, whom many of us have given the name God, works. Supernovas, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tornadoes and hurricanes, flooding, wildfires are all cyclic occurrences, part of a universe, part of a planet at work. And in the wake of their destruction, newness emerges. Supernovas create new solar systems and planets. Volcanic eruptions provide rich new soils, sprouting life, new landscapes. Hurricanes stir up ocean bottom nutrients and make them available for ocean dwellers and those who feed off them. These cyclic and violent events are what keep this planet alive, healthy, and ever evolving into more than it was before. Nothing new emerges without the breakdown of the former. Understanding this bigger context of evolution, we can see that cataclysm, breakdown, is a necessary part of the process of creating what comes next. And even as we grieve what is lost, which we must do, even as we work to help assist those whose lives have been turned upside down, we attend to what is being birthed. Now, it is one thing, and perhaps easier, to accept cataclysm and the ensuing chaos in the rest of the natural world, isn't it? But what about the breakdown of planetary relationships and the ensuing damage that we humans cause? Even the exacerbation of those natural cyclic events by our lifestyle choices, by our political, religious, economic actions, by our own ignorance or greed or mistaken sense of safety and security. What newness is birthed from that? What creativity is unleashed from us? Hasn't it been new insights, new levels of awareness, and sometimes even quantum leaps in consciousness? It sometimes takes generations before we act on our new awareness, and sometimes we act within one generation. As newness and beauty from the chaos of breakdown emerge in the universe, so newly emerging levels of awareness arise within us. Our transformation of consciousness, which we are only now beginning to understand as part of the evolutionary process, comes from the breakdown of old ways of thinking. Experiencing the worst that human nature can dish out, we humans now are more collectively aware that war only perpetuates war, more violence, that genocide and biocide are unconscionable, that slavery in any form of any species is not to be tolerated, that racism and nationalism and genderism and religionism make us less human, keep us from loving and therefore from flourishing, and are so antithetical to life, we can rightfully name them sin. We are growing into the awareness of the oxymoron of utilizing our economic institutions to destroy the very planetary systems that support the web of life. We come to recognize that the whole of creation has rights, and denying the rights of any one part compromises the rights of the whole. These steps, often leaps into new consciousness, do not occur unless and until the old paradigms and structures that support them break down. And it takes some pretty horrific events like our current ones to break open that new awareness. So often we find ourselves asking, why can't people see what they're doing? Why can't we accept everyone? Why can't we recognize the integrity of all humans, of the whole of life, of Earth herself? It is because these deeper levels of awareness are only now coming to the fore. No wonder we are stumbling along with them. The universe is still unfolding. It is not finished, and neither are we. We are not human beings, already finished and only needing some intermittent polishing up. We are still in the process of becoming human. We are not human beings, we are human becoming. Thanks to the many women and men throughout the ages who have helped seed this consciousness. thanks to the breakdown that forces us into action and new thinking. These new levels of awareness are now emerging within our collective soul. They are moving into the mainstream of human consciousness, not within all of us or at the same pace, but certainly collectively. Look for it. It's easy to watch the news and hear only the violence and the devastation. Look for what is emerging out of that violence among the youth, among more and more women finding their voice and their courage, among indigenous communities speaking for their homelands, for Earth. We are beginning to look at the bigger picture and not just trying to fix what we see as broken, which has been our mode of operation up until now. And it's not working. It has never worked. Our Band-Aid approaches have not brought about the lasting changes we all desire, but they have been steps to move us into this greater awareness that whole systems are out of whack, and those are what need to be challenged and altered. How do we keep moving into this new awareness? One necessary step is to change our language. The words we use have tremendous power. Language and the stories we tell create our reality and can keep us trapped in one way of thinking. An example pertinent to our discussion. So often when we are speaking about justice, we either use the term social justice or we infer social justice, working to bring about for all humans fair and equitable opportunities, privileges, and division of resources, which is another problematic word, by the way. The term social justice is still very operative, and that term perpetuates misguided pictures of reality. It keeps us from seeing the bigger picture. We humans do not stand alone. We are part of a much larger reality. What makes us human and allows us to flourish is our intimate relationship with the entire planet, all the other than humans, and all that which supports life on Earth. That relationship means that we affect and are affected by everything that happens on this planet. Corporately owned privatized water, water contaminated with chemicals and lead, threaten access to water and the purity of drinking water, water needed for food production, sacramental rituals, recreation, and mental health, all of which directly affect the welfare of humans and also threaten the rest of life on this planet. Migration, human trafficking, displacement of populations, unemployment, homelessness are direct results of the inability of people to make a living, which is most often due to any number of ecological disasters, both cyclic and human-induced. These issues are all connected and cannot be addressed separately, specifically seeing some as environmental and some as social. Using the term social justice perpetuates what I call the Band-Aid concept, as do the terms criminal justice and racial justice and economic justice and other subsets of social justice. Though such a focus has helped concentrate our energy and ability to structure specific responses to inequities, it has not resolved any of the systemic evils that create the problems we seek to address. Because the problems that cause social, racial, economic, gender disparity are intimately interconnected with one another and with the world of which we are part. They cannot be treated as distinctly separate issues. Environmental justice is also one of those narrow-focused Band-Aid terms. It has been understood as addressing the unfair exposure of poor and marginalized human communities to the harm caused from toxic pollution, mineral and fossil fuel extraction, and other egregious actions against land and water and air. This anthropocentric view perpetuates our several centuries long dualistic misconception that here we humans are, and the environment is everything else out there, separate and apart from us, and can thus so be addressed. Again, we are dramatically learning the fallacy of that view. Social justice and environmental justice, two separate branches of justice, with different and distinct fields of study and approaches to analysis and action and legislation, connected at the trunk's bottom, but not integrated in any meaningful way, and both focused on humans. We are moving out of this worldview. Thanks to science, to an emerging understanding of how the universe functions in its interconnected reality, and thanks also to a re-emerging Earth spirituality, we are beginning to understand that subtitling justice does not make our response to injustice more manageable. The term ecological justice or eco-justice might help us do so. We all know that eco is from the Greek oikos, which means household or home, in this case referring to the household of our planetary home, Earth. Ecology, the study of Earth's household. Economy, the study of managing Earth's household. Eco-friendly, that which seeks to do little or no harm to the household. Eco-justice, that which works to restore a healthy relationship in the household to that which has been broken. For now, the terms ecological justice or eco-justice or planetary justice speak to that greater reality. Pope Francis echoes this understanding in his document Laudato Si on care for our common home. In paragraph 139, he writes, "We are not faced with two separate crises, one environmental and the other social, but rather with one complex crisis. Strategies for a solution demand an integrated approach." By shifting our focus from what we mistakenly believe is only about the human community to what we now know is really about the viability of life itself, gives us the context of finding effective and relevant alternatives to the systems that are hindering Earth's ability to sustain life in any meaningful way. I hope this makes sense. Science has provided us a context and the empirical facts to understand our world in a way we could have never done before. We are finally beginning to grasp that what one does anywhere affects everyone else everywhere. Along with science, we humans also have another source of wisdom, garnered over the many millennia of our living together in communities. It is the collective wisdom of the world's faith, however it is expressed in all its varieties, whether churched or unchurched. We humans have a collective faith in something much greater than ourselves, and that requires from us a responsible role to play in this bigger picture. We are a spiritual species. We are a rational species, and we are still in the process of becoming. It is these two sources of wisdom, science and faith, that will help us meet the challenges of the all too painful lesson we are learning, that we cannot have physically, mentally, spiritually healthy people on a sick planet. And until we are willing to use our relational and mental resources, we are stuck with using only our Band-Aids instead of acknowledging and addressing the underlying systemic causes. And they are more than one. In fact, we can no longer really speak about cause and effect as we have in the past. In an interconnected universe, everything is so tied together that there is no one cause that creates an effect. Rather, we live in a universal causal network where all the relationships continually rub up against one another and create the ongoing change that we call evolution. And all of that rubbing together on Earth has created a situation that has now become the greatest crises our human species has ever had to face. In Laudato Si and in all his other communications, Francis echoes what science is telling us. The crisis of climate change is not only exacerbating all our efforts to bring about justice, it has become our overarching justice issue. It has become the context for all our current crises. It is intimately connected with the causes of poverty, war, migration, lack of clean and accessible water and air, with human trafficking. And we are now at a point as well where we can say climate disruption is the single most important life issue. Now, how can we say that? Franciscan friar Dan Horan says it so well. What good is it to focus solely on one specific life issue, he asks, if there is no air to breathe, water to drink, land to farm, plants or animals to eat, or habitats free from flooding, hurricanes, wildfires, tornadoes, or some of the other devastating weather phenomena? The climate crisis is this generation's life issue, and it is a uniquely human challenge in that we are the only species who can respond to it. The rest of creation can only react, possibly adapt, or fail to survive. Now, it seems more than overwhelming, doesn't it? Despite how bad it looks, however, there is much we can still do. And certainly there is much more that we can become. We must listen and respond to the science, and we must put what is happening in the context of our faith in a creator, however we name or image that, who has made the universe in its entirety, has made it to work the way it does, and out of which has created a species with remarkable creativity, insight, compassion, and motivation. We are in the throes of a major breakdown, not just the chaos of climate events, but all our human institutions, economics, politics, education, church, law. They just aren't working for us anymore. Perhaps their historical time is complete. What that means for us then is that we have the opportunity to help midwife what the future might become. We have the power to do that. We have listened too long to the voices who say we are powerless, we are insignificant. What we do or what we want doesn't matter. Not so. Imagine what we could do when we come together, listen to one another, listen to all the voices of creation, and work together to bring about a future of dignity for the whole of life. It is our choices today that help birth that future. That is what hope is about. Hope, a uniquely human quality. I wish to bring this together by returning to the title of my remarks. Ecological justice requires more than caring for our common home. As I'm sure you've noted, caring for our common home refers to the subtitle of Laudato Si, on care for our common home. You know, we so often hear the words that we are to care for creation. We are to be caretakers of Earth. Caring for creation is not enough. Caring does not adequately reflect our role and responsibility to the community of life on Earth. It does not express the depth of the obligation that is ours to live as responsible members of the Earth community. Caring does not require from us accountability for our actions or the need to understand how our actions affect the whole. We can care in the most altruistic sense, yet do little to alleviate the suffering or address the underlying causes that cause the suffering. Caring is not enough. We have work to do. Each one of us is called to contribute in whatever way we can, with whatever capacity we have at any given moment. That's what is asked of us. Oscar Wilde wrote, "Once our minds have been stretched into seeing the larger picture, they can never go back to their former dimensions." A transformation of consciousness really means there is no going back. And though the progress we have made these past years certainly feeds into that emerging awareness, we know that we cannot go back to slogging the same paths that dead end in frustration and impasse. They are not creating the system change that will bring about healing and wholeness. We are called to respond to the cry of earth, the cry of the poor, with all the creativity and variety of gifts and passions and skills we possess. Now knowing we are not alone in this work. We join with the wisdom of the entire Earth community who has been at this work far longer than we. And therein lies our hope and the promise of a viable future for all. Let me close with these words of historian Howard Zinn. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act. And if we do act in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of present moments. And to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Sharon. I would like to introduce our first reflector, Yara Ake. Yara is a current first-year student here at the School of Social Work, where she's focusing on providing trauma-informed clinical care to refugee and immigrant populations. In the past, she has worked as a contact tracer at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as a mental health counselor for adolescents struggling with eating disorders. Yara is passionate about the impact of inequality on mental health and promoting mental health care accessibility to marginalized communities. Yara?
Thanks, Deb, and thank you so much, Sister Sharon, for such a wonderful talk. I so appreciated how you talked about this concept of the great unraveling as this breakdown of human relations. I think a lot of us may have been feeling some dread, about that in recent times, and the way that you really use that to spread a message of hope by saying nothing new emerges without the breakdown of the former, and talking about this emerging awareness and transformation of consciousness. and your call to action to be part of building something new really does spread, I think, a much needed message of hope. And so I wanted to ask, and I know you alluded to this at the end with the Howard Zinn quote about turning to the past for moments of good as well. But I wanted to ask, where does this hope come from for you, and how do you tap into it as you do this work?
Actually, it comes from a variety of sources, but one of the things that has become much more meaningful to me in these past years is understanding the whole creation story, the whole cosmic story. If you look at the dynamics of the universe and how that cycle, that rhythmic cycle of birthing and maturing and then breakdown, and then out of that breakdown comes new awareness, it comes new birthing. I have come to rely on that more and more, and I've come to look for it. And so every time I hear something awful happening, and there is more than a listen we can handle right now, right? Every time I hear one more thing, I remind myself the system is breaking down. What do I want to see birthed out of that? What can I do in order to help birth the kind of future I want to see?
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Yara, and thank you, Sister Sharon. I'm going to remember that going forward. Michael J. Novak is a social worker and has over 25 years of leadership experience working with hundreds of individuals and their families in crisis, in need, in transition, and or coping with loss, poverty, addiction, trauma, disability, children with special needs, dementia, and chronic illness. Michael currently serves on the BUSSW Alumni Board, as well as formerly served on the board of the New England chapter of the Aging Life Care Association. Michael currently works at the West Roxbury VA as a senior social worker with the Behavioral Recovery Outreach Team. Michael?
Thank you. Sister, thank you so much for your presentation. Very, very insightful. I think what struck me most was, the idea of climate change being our #1 justice issue. And I think what I worry about is I worry about the earth itself and the vessel that we are all a part of, and sort of what we've done to the earth over time. I worry that scientists who, we would like to, embrace science and to listen to what they're saying, but scientists are telling us that it might be too late in terms of for the future of the planet. I guess I wonder sort of, in light of that and in light of the things that we're seeing in the world, especially like the things that are going on in Los Angeles with the fires, but also just the disparity that we're seeing in the world between sort of the haves and the have-nots, sort of how do we respond to that, and how do we respond to people who are basically telling us at times that it might be too late for the planet when you think about where we're going to be 50 years from now?
Well, I don't think it's too late for the planet. The planet is going to survive. Earth is going to continue. What it may be, what it is already too late for are the species that are gone. In some ways, science is right in saying it's too late. We can't stop climate change. We cannot do that any longer. So in some sense, yeah, some things are too late, but that doesn't make it too late for everything. And that's why we have to follow. Science is science and faith, science and hope. It's a matter of recognizing that we are losing some really amazing things that have been part of this planet, and we have to grieve that. I mentioned that. We have to grieve those losses. I think part of our issues with a lot of things is we don't know how to grieve, especially in this country. We do not, which compounds so many of our other problems. But out of that, we're losing that. We have to grieve that, and yet we have to do the work that we can in whatever way we can to try to ensure that whatever is saved, whatever can be saved, that we can work towards that. And I'll probably go over my 2 minutes. There's this wonderful little video about the penguins, the species I think it's the Adelie penguins. I'm not sure if it's that species in Antarctica, which are dying out because there's no longer enough ice and cold, and their chicks aren't able to hatch in the ice. They're actually hatching in water. That species is going to die out, and that is a tragedy. At the same time, there is another species of penguins that are thriving because of that change in temperature. So it goes back to that rhythm, that balance of life. Yes, we're going to lose a lot, and we are. And at the same point, there are others that are moving forward. So how do we see one as a grief that we have to recognize, and the other as a hope that life will go on very differently than we've known it, but it will go on.
Thank you, Michael and Sharon.
Thank you.
Dr. Tammy Gouvet directs the Center for Innovation in Social Work and Health at Boston University. A leader in social work, public health, and policy, she served 2 terms in the Massachusetts House of Representatives, advancing justice and health equity. With 25 years in public health social work, Tammy has led efforts to prevent trauma, expand healthcare access, and defend human rights through roles in government, nonprofits, and philanthropy. Believing in the power of the collective action for shared humanity, Tammy founded and co-led the Women's March and is the key developer of the Beyond 2025 Action Hub. Tammy?
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Sister Sharon. I really appreciated your talk because what I could hear as an underpinning to it is system science and just the dynamic interaction of so many things. Whether you're talking about the climate or you're talking about individual health or population health or the health of animals and of our food systems, et cetera, et cetera. So I really appreciated that. You can hear from my bio that I sort of live in the space between and straddling health and climate, as well as social justice. That's really where I grew up in public health social work, is through environmental justice, growing up in the city of Lowell, Massachusetts. So another reason why I appreciated your talk is that you're really reminding us, and I've seen this a lot, where people will say, we got to fight for the planet because it doesn't matter, like, if we address racial justice if we don't have a planet to live on. And then you hear people in racial justice spaces saying we got to deal with the urgent that we have before us. And for me, it always is a both and, because what's underlying all of it really is what I see as control and power and concentration of power and abuses of power. So we'd love to hear you just talk a little bit about what are your sources of inspiration, whether it's resources that you go to, books that you've read that really help and can help students or newer folks to thinking about the both and sort of bridge some of those gaps in the ways that our society is organized, and thinking about those major disparities that are getting bigger and bigger, not by the year, but literally by the minute. So yeah, what are your sources of inspiration and resources that you could share that we could go to for our own pickups when we need them? Thank you so much.
The resources that have really helped develop my understanding are some good readable books, science books. People have always said, oh, you can understand this because you're a scientist. No, actually, my first major was history, but I can understand this because I'm a historian, If we can really begin to look at, one book, The Journey of the Universe by Brian Swimme, is a wonderful story about how the universe begins and about how it becomes who we are now. And what I've learned to do is to read science, read scientific facts, which I know are always changing, because as we learn more, of course, it changes. That doesn't negate them as a fact or a truth. And look at them and say, okay, wow, so a supernova. Okay, supernovas are really cool. All right, but what's the implication of a supernova? What does a supernova have to do in my own life? Are there supernovas in my life? So it's not so much what I read as how I read. And it's a matter of reading science and looking for the deeper implications for my faith and for the way I live my life. And then it's also a matter of looking at getting some good eco-theologians. John Hott is one of my favorite theologians, eco-theologians. Elizabeth Johnson is really wonderful. In her book, Ask the Beasts, it's really a foundational thing. So to look at theologians who are also beginning to move into looking at our faith traditions and looking at it in light of the bigger cosmic story. And then I read a lot of things like The Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake, and looking at let's see. The Hidden Life of Trees. I mean, books like that, they're very readable and people go, But if you really take your time and reflect on them, for those of you who do meditate, who do contemplate, if you take any kind of reading and do that, just begin to ask yourself different kinds of questions as you're reading this. Go outside. You need to be outside. Nobody goes outside anymore. You know, we're all connected to our technology. And if we want outside, we put it on our screen as a screensaver. You know, go outside, spend time outdoors, listen. Close your eyes, listen to creation. You've got to provide yourself opportunities to get out of your own little box. I actually have a list. I can't tell you how many pages it is of my favorite books. If you want it, I could send it to you, but you know, it's probably got about 100 books on it. So just explore, stretch your comfort zones. And begin to read things that you normally wouldn't have read, but look at them in a different way. You know, the thing that's going to get us out of this mess that we're in, is to begin to understand the bigger picture, as we also at the same time attend to what is right before us. And that's what makes it so difficult. We have to balance the two. We have to look at the broad, and yet we also have to attend to the two. And it's so hard for us to do that. You know, that's why we have so many different disciplines looking at so many different issues, because we have to focus and focus and focus and make that focus more narrow. And that's important. But we can't do it without remembering that it's part of this whole bigger picture. So we have to have the rhythm of moving into the bigger picture and back into the what's right before us. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Thank you, Sister Sharon, and thank you, Tammy. We have a question in the chat. The question is first of all, thank you for the talk, Sister Sharon. And then the question, I'm wondering what living responsibly in this breakdown phase looks like to you.
Well, one of the things is I keep reminding myself to keep my own equilibrium, because, you know, it's so easy to pendulum swing from despair to just wanting to get out and not deal with any of it because it's just so overwhelming, and it's going to become more overwhelming. So one of the things that I have been working on for the last several months, and will continue to, is to again try to keep a focus on what it is that I can do, because I certainly can't do everything. I can't address everything. I can't allow everything to weigh me down so much I don't want to do anything or feel like I can't do anything. But to try to keep my own balance and rhythm and respond to the ways that I can, and not to get caught up. I'm promising myself not to get caught up in all of the garbage that's being thrown at us, and to be selective in what I listen to and what I respond to. And just to keep my faith and my hope that I know I do, and I believe firmly that we are in a major breakdown. So what can I personally do in order to try to help move all of this forward by the way I think, by the way I pray, by the way I hope, by the way I interact with others, by the choices I make about how I live and what I eat and who I speak to and how I speak to them. You know.
Thank you so much, Sister Sharon. I have a request to finish up, and I have one more question in the chat. So if it is okay, I'm going to ask the last question in the chat. The question is, how do we balance the two when all the products we buy, example, plastics, the corporations are not accountable to making changes? Sometimes it feels like our personal actions are so insignificant.
They aren't, they are not. And that's where we make a mistake. Our actions are important. And as long as we think they're insignificant, then why bother to do anything? My congregation and a number of women's congregations in this country are working. The Pope has a Low Dr. Action Platform plan, and our plan this last year and this year is working on reducing plastics. So contacting our legislators, contacting whoever it is that we need to do, and making our own choices as best we can in this plastic world to reduce the amount of plastic that we use. Now, it may seem like it's futile to do that, but I'm not going to give up on doing that, because as soon as I do, I'm given in, and then they've won.
Very good. We want to thank everyone for coming. Our wonderful speakers, Sister Sharon Zayac, our insightful reflectors, Yara Ake, Michael Novak, and Dr. Tammy Gouvet, and our amazing behind-the-scene tech workers and research assistants, Marcus, Sarah, and Julia. One more reminder that if you are getting CEs, you must complete the form using the link Julia just put in the chat. In the movement, we like to say that the path to justice is more like a marathon and not a sprint. Take good care of yourselves, everyone, because we need all of you to create our new world. We hope to see you at our next Equity and Inclusion Speakers event in February. And thank you again, and onward.
Thank you.
Marcus, can you just put the CEU link in the chat again, just so one more time, so in case people, thank you.